Hey everyone, how you doing? Welcome to the channel. It's review day today and I'm going to be taking a look at Starlight. This is book 1 of the Gifts of the Old Tree by E.L. Lyons. So Starlight Jewel by E.L. Lyons is a self-published adult fantasy. It was entered into the SPFBO competition this year, SPFBO 9, and according to the categories on Goodreads, it's adult fantasy and romance. I've seen a few people who have made the assumption that it's fantasy romance based on the cover, and I can kind of see that it does have some of those elements. From reading it, I wouldn't really call it a fantasy romance myself. There are romance elements in it, of course, and they are important to the plot, but I wouldn't say it's the key element in there. The fantasy definitely takes up more of it, and the romance is more of a backseat part of the story itself. So this one kind of surprised me because I went into it, as I tried to with pretty much all of my books, I went into it blind. I read the synopsis a while ago, and then by the time I started reading it, enough time had passed for me to have forgotten pretty much all of what it's about. But I didn't go into it completely without expectation, because my friend Esme had read it shortly before I did, and she said that she didn't think it was going to be a book for me. We have very different tastes, but we do align quite well with our fantasy, and over the last year or so I think we've got quite good at kind of judging each other's fantasy tastes, which is really good when it comes obviously to recommending books. I'm pleased to say that Esme was wrong with this one, because I did have a really good time with it, and it did, I guess, therefore surprise me a little bit. So with this one, the main part of it, the main kind of element for me is the world building, and that's what I do love about fantasy. It does often tend to be the way. You have Spriggans in this world. You can see on the cover this guy on the one side is kind of a tree man, essentially. They are the Spriggans. And then you've got hybrids as well, who are human Spriggan hybrids. Basically, they're half-breeds. And these hybrids have gifts, the Gifts of the Old Tree of the series title, that allow them to be much more than human, much better than human in many respects. They might have quick step or keen sight. I can't remember the names of them. I should have kind of noted them down, but things that allow them to be quicker and quieter of foot, allow them to see and hear a lot better than humans can. And one of the rarer and I think more interesting abilities or gifts is effacing, which is the kind of the gift of memories. And this allows a hybrid to remove the memories of a human. Hybrids are immune to effacing. They can't have their memories taken, but humans can. And this plays a really important part of the storyline, and I like exploring all of the individual facets of effacing, what it can and can't do, what its limitations are, and the impact of having memories removed as well, I thought was really, really interesting. As far as the plot goes, there's kind of a few threads that go from the start to the finish of the book, but it is kind of a book of little subplots, little mini plots, rather than one key thing that takes you from A to B from start to finish. So we have our main character, Axley, is one of these hybrids, and she's got the whole gamut of these Gifts of the Old Tree except for effacing, so she can do everything except for take people's memories, and she's basically trying to keep her brother safe. She's trying to protect him and keep him out of sight and knowledge as well of pretty much the entire world. She doesn't want them to know what he is, and I like how we don't know what he is either until we get further into the book. It's kind of unveiled to us gradually in terms of who he is and what he can do, and what the impact of that kind of power, I guess, getting into the wrong hands could be. I like how we see that gradually. We start to see individual aspects of it opening up as we learn more about the character and we learn more about the world. We start off with an introduction to Axley and really knowing the type of person she is and what she can do with her different powers. She is the Starlight Jewel of the book title. She is the crown jewel essentially of the Starlight Company, and they are kind of a band of crooks. In a sense, they run the city of Minalav, and a lot of what they do would normally be kind of described as being the underground side of things, the seedy underworld, I guess. So as an example, one of Axley's key kind of attributes is she is a seductress, she's also a thief, she's also an assassin. She will get herself close to a human through means of seduction, she will steal from him, and then her team, her kind of backup crew who keep her safe, will efface him. So they will take away his memories of her, so he won't know what's happened, he won't know who has robbed him or any of the details of it, and so forth. And I think that's really quite interesting. The effacing, the taking away of memories, is kind of described almost as the taking away of faces. Is really interesting. I like the way that it was explored. I like the way that it was detailed. And one of the key aspects of the storyline does revolve around this kind of memory stealing, in a sense. You can't have your memories given back. They are destroyed, essentially. They are gone. So you have the kind of exploration of two people who know each other, but one of those has forgotten or had their memories removed of that second person. But it's just memories. It's almost the, if you like, physical aspect of the memory. It's the sight, the actions, the history that these two people have had together. But you can't remove the feeling. So someone might have kind of a connection to somebody, but they don't know why, because those memories themselves have gone. They'd just be a bit kind of fuzzy over what happened over the past week, for instance. And I thought it was really interesting because there are other stories that deal with memory loss, kind of forced memory loss in a sense, in different ways. So for instance, Tethered Spirits, one of the finalists from SPF 08 last year, had a character who was cursed. He would be killed, and then because of his curse he would wake up basically the next morning, but he wouldn't have any memories. He wouldn't know who he is, who the people around him are, what happened, and so forth. And he has a journal written in his own hand which will tell him the answer to all of those questions, basically. In here we don't have any of that, but we do have kind of little bits here and there that explain as well why that isn't possible. I won't go into it in detail, but I like the way that it was all explored and the way that the question is kind of asked, I guess. How do you prove to somebody that they know you if they've got no recollection of you whatsoever? So in terms of the plot itself, you have one key storyline for the first part of the book, and then you'll have a second storyline and then a third storyline. It's not disjointed, although any way that I've tried to describe it to myself in preparation for talking about it, it does sound disjointed. It comes across that way. I didn't feel like it was disjointed at all. It all flowed very nicely. You will have little time jumps every now and then, but they are kind of explained away quite quickly in the narrative. It will say it had been a half a year since they'd seen each other or something along those lines, rather than having a subtitle to the chapter saying that it was 2 years later or what the year was, and you can work it out for yourself, and so forth. I think overall the one thing that probably acted as a drawback for me was the way that the story was split up in this way. It's kind of mini plots rather than one big plot with little side bits going off it. And although you do have these threads that go all the way from the start, the key one being the protection of Axley's brother, I do feel like there could have been something that just held it all together a little bit better. As I say, it wasn't disjointed or anything like that, but it did feel like I was reading sort of a few key events from this overall story rather than maybe reading the overall story in itself. Part of that is by design, because you have to learn various aspects of the history and the world before you can learn all of these things about Axley's brother and why he is so important and why he can be seen as so dangerous. So I definitely appreciated that, despite how it might sound. I really did like the world building in here. The Spriggans and all of these gifts made it so interesting, and as I say, I think the main thing for me was this whole power of effacing and the different times it's used and the different contexts and the different effects that it has on the overall story and the characters. I thought was really, really well handled. The romance, as I say, is kind of a minor part of it. It does play a part in the storyline. It drives various aspects of the storyline along, and I think it was handled really well. I think it all fit together quite well. There was maybe a kind of speedy element to it. However, that's also kind of covered in the storyline because it doesn't start off as a romance. It's kind of a con that our character actually is playing on her mark, essentially. So overall, I thought it was a good book. It was quite a surprising read for me. I did give it 4.5 stars because it wasn't perfect, but I just had a really good time reading it. I'll move into my weighted ratings, and that enjoyment led to me giving it a 17 out of 20 because it was just a fun book to read. It was nice and free-flowing. I didn't have any aspects of it that I didn't really enjoy. As with any book, you might have bits where you perhaps wish they could have been handled a bit differently, but that doesn't affect the overall enjoyment of it. The world building I also gave 17 because I just thought it was really interesting. The Spriggans and the hybrids and the powers that they have and the impact on the world that they can have. I just thought it was really good to explore, and I'm looking forward to reading on in this series and seeing how that does develop as the series develops. The characters I gave 16. I thought they were very interesting. I quite enjoyed the characters that we had. Again, this is something that I'm looking forward to seeing develop across the series because I think there's plenty of room and plenty of potential there. The plot I gave 15. I do like the overall idea of it. As I say, it was kind of broken up into mini plots rather than one kind of overarching plot, although you did have those threads going from the start to the finish of the book. The writing I thought was really good. I gave it 8 out of 10. I thought it was very free-flowing, very easy to read. No areas of confusion as I was reading through clunky sentences or anything along those lines, so that's all good. The pacing I've given 4 out of 5 because I thought it was very nicely paced. It was quite balanced for me, but it did have some really nice kind of fast-paced parts in here as well, which is what I generally tend to go for. And then for the discretionary, I've given 2 out of 5 because I did have a good time for overall, but as far as the book itself goes, although the cover's not necessarily one for me, I do like the colours on it. I think it works together very well. You've got a nice map in here, and you've got a nice... it's almost paid from a bestiary in the front as well. It just gives you a bit more information about the Spriggans. It's got a nice illustration of a Spriggan as well, and some good text around it, just giving you a bit more detail, so I definitely appreciated that. Overall, that gave Starlight Jewel by E.L. Lyons 79% in my weighted ratings, which is a really good score. It's just below the 80s, which would give you a typical, if you're going to compare it, 4-star rating. Remember, I did give this one a 4.5-star rating though, because I definitely enjoyed it enough for that. The overall rank that puts it at is equal 87, and there's some real big name authors and books in that range, so it shows how well this one has done. That's all for today anyway with Starlight Jewel by E.L. Lyons. Definitely pick this one up if it's one that sounds like it might be interesting. It's got some really great world building and some great ideas in here, and as I say, I'm looking forward to reading more and seeing where they go. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read this one and what do you think about it. I'll hopefully see you in the next video sometime soon. Until then, as always, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.